why you're up here. My name is Lundquist-Arora. I'm from Fairfax County, sadly. And I'm here, I've been active in, I'm also the chapter leader for the Independent Women's Network, so we heavily work with moms for liberty. So, anyways, I've been really involved since 2020. I was homeschooling my kids during the school closures, and then I kind of got into seeing all the dysfunction that was happening. And I could tell you dozens and dozens of stories, so I'll just open with one that I think is really a reflection of parents' rights and the failure of schools to alert parents on certain things. So when my son was in middle school, and all of the stories I hear are, I think I'm a stories carrier. I try to represent the stories of young people, especially, who come to me and tell me about what's happening in their schools. And some of them are from my own children, and some of them are from other children. In fact, some of them are from other children that have parents in the audience. But anyways, my son came to me and said in middle school, I had a lesson on white privilege in school. And nobody had alerted me about this, and this is during the time that the left was telling us that there was no critical race theory being taught in schools. So I contacted the principal and I said, I just heard that you administered in social emotional learning a lesson on white privilege to my children. I think that's really problematic. I would like to review this lesson. And as a parent, you have the right, it's called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. You have the right to review curriculum in a timely manner. Well, the principal apparently didn't think so, or it was probably that she wasn't trained on this legislation, as they're not in Fairfax County. I don't believe they're trained on this. So she sent my request to the Freedom of Information Act office, which, by the way, if you're from one of these counties in Northern Virginia, you know that they play a lot of games. They charge you egregious amounts of money. They make you play all of these waiting games on things. So eventually, even with back and forth, I paid $280 for this lesson. And I published about it in the Federalist. So you can, I'm also a contributor to the Federalist, Washington Examiner, Independent Women's Features. So I write a lot of these stories in these places. So I paid the $280 and I published on it, and then I also filed a federal PPRA complaint, which is they took it up after Trump was elected, and that's ongoing. So I think that we're gonna have a win on that. So that's just one story of so many.
Thank you. Yes, when we were talking before, I said, do you have 3 or 4 stories? And she got to like story number 27. And I was like, just 3. So that was one, and we'll probably get to a couple more. Will you please introduce yourself?
My name is Martha Cutsinger. I'm in Prince William County. I do not currently have kids in school. I think that's obvious. But in 2017, I was involved in our school board in a getting rid of someone way. And that person, he was the chair of the school board at the time, and he was introducing the concept of trans kids using bathrooms. It went back that far. And I was gobsmacked by that. And at the same time, my older child was starting to look at colleges. She was going to be graduated in 2018. And I started realizing what the heck has happened on college campuses since I was there a long time ago. So I just became obsessed with trying to understand where we were at, where this was coming from. I discovered James Lindsay. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with him. Yeah, so I've become a student of James Lindsay since then, especially during COVID. I used that time to really dive into his stuff, and have made it kind of a mission of mine to inform anyone who will listen, friends, neighbors, Facebook people I don't know, about where we are, how we got here, and that, it's Marxism. And now what queer theory is doing to schools and how awful it is. And so I don't have specific stories to tell from school, but I'll tell you a recent one. One of my kids has come to be aware, I'm trying to be very careful how I state this story. She's come to be aware of a girl, 22-year-old girl, who transitioned to a boy. she's 22 now, and I don't know how old she was when she had a hysterectomy and a double mastectomy, but before she was 22, obviously. And the years of hormones, drugs, cross-sex hormones, all the kinds of things that these kids get put on today have resulted in her developing a liver disorder, and the cure for that she's allergic to. So the girl's dying, and she knows she's dying, and she's acknowledged that she's dying, and I'm assuming that she has regret about the transition, but these are the stories that you don't hear about. And I think these things happen more often than not, or will happen as these kids are on lifelong drugs that they're not told about at the time that they make the choice to transition. So and this is something I just learned about last week, so I'm even more motivated now to help Virginians understand what's in store if, God help us, those in the front row here are not our next leaders next year. Thank you.
I've taught in Fairfax County, Loudoun County, and I've homeschooled my children. So I'm passionate about education and education reform because there's been a drastic change since about 2010. And I became significantly aware of it in 2019, driving home from a baseball game with my son, and an email came through from Loudoun County Public Schools saying that there was literacy libraries going into each classroom, and that piqued my interest because in all of the years that I've taught, we've never gotten a library in our classroom. We've always funded them ourselves, so I was shocked about that. So I started, I pulled up my son's class list and started vetting the books, and within an hour there were 5 books that I had significant concerns about, CRT and sexually explicit material, and so I reached out to my son's principal and his teacher. His teacher was very gracious, actually had no idea what was going on. His principal went up the chain of command because this all got kind of thrown on them at the beginning of the school year. And her response to me was that because I told her my son was not allowed to read any of these books. And and until I had a chance to vet all of them, he couldn't touch them. So she responded to me and said that the books were going to be in the classroom library, they were not going to be marked, and they were going to be interdispersed between all the other books. So immediately she was telling me that I didn't have parental rights, that I checked them in when I dropped my son off at the door, and that they were intentionally trying to put these books in our children's hands. And that was a kick in the stomach. The school system that I taught for, that I loved, that 3 older children had graduated from was violating our parental rights, and that they wanted to put these books in our children's hands. Now, do I think the principal wanted to do that? No. But were they being forced? Yes, because our schools are captured. They are captured by a Marxist ideology. They can try and deny it all they want. This is Agenda 2030 coming in. It's a very progressive agenda, and so that's how I got involved. And then a week later, I was involved in CRT training as a teacher, and everything changed in 2019. I was shocked. So I pulled my son out of school and homeschooled him during COVID, and then I put him back in as an 8th grader his freshman year in high school. He's playing football, he's changing in the locker room, and the next thing he knows, there's a girl who's identifying as a boy in their locker room while his pants are down and his teammates are changing. And my son grabbed all of his stuff and dove out into the hallway and was completely mortified. And they're in a captured school system. He was a freshman, he didn't want to make waves. My husband contacted the athletic director. They were told that the boys needed to contact their coach and that there would be an alternative place for them to change. For the boys who all had issues. Well, they were all terrified to speak up. They were new to the school. They were, they didn't want to make waves with their coaches. They had come out of the year before where they were told if they mispronounced and misnamed somebody, they were going to get in trouble. And so that's not a far-fetched, because we have 3 young men in Loudoun County who have Title IX violations because they spoke up and said they were uncomfortable with a girl in their locker room. So it's not far-fetched. These boys did everything they could during the season to not exploit this young lady and protect her. And at the end of the season, they held a school walkout that was very well attended and picked up nationally, but they were met with such resistance the entire time. So it is imperative that we vote for Winsome Sears and John Reid. We need Jason Mears. This is the only hope, and this is the only change that we have seen in our school system, because they are not listening to parents. So the only thing they're listening to is codified law and lawsuits. So it is imperative that we vote down ballot, all the way Republican, so we can make changes in the educational system in Virginia. Chris, you're up next.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Funderberg. I'm the Vice Chair of Moms for Liberty in Prince William County. Thank you.
Yeah, we take dads too, by the way.
Yeah, they not only let me join, but they, after Mary Ann was stepping down, asked me to help lead, so I was happy to step in there. I'm a father of 5 kids, 2 that have matriculated from Prince William County schools, thankfully, but I still have 3 more. And I started getting involved when I started checking out the books in our little Nokesville town school library, and found that they had at least 3 books for kindergartners about transgenderism. Kindergartners. So it starts young. That was my first foray into the school board meeting where I met Mary Ann and Jen and some of the others. From there, I started getting into the DEI and CRT, and I would spend time at school board meetings explaining to them, this is what you're trying to teach, and this is what's going to happen from it. And I take great pleasure every time it does, and I can come back and say, I told you so. From there, I've been helping push back on the transgender policy 738-5 in Prince William County, because it's especially egregious that it requires teachers to lie to parents if the child does not want the parent to know that they're transitioning. So they could have different pronouns, different name, and even change clothes at school, and the parents may never know. So I'm a little bit more brief in my speaking, but.
No, that's perfectly fine. Everybody appreciates brevity. I would like to ask you said you have a daughter?
Oh yes, I have 2 daughters. Actually I have 3, but one is off to college. She doesn't have this problem anymore at Liberty University. But yeah, see, I told my kids I'll pay for school if you go to Liberty, and that's it.
Not a bad idea.
No.
And so they're still in K-12, and
Yeah,
are they feeling the effects of this policy, or?
Absolutely, for years. They're in 8th and 12th now, or 8th and 10th, but for the past couple of years, there is a transgender student at the school, and my daughters don't want to use the bathroom at the school. They either wait until after school's over, or since I live next door, they'll come home and use the bathroom, but then go back to school.
It's insanity, guys. It's insanity. It's not okay. And how about you? So your son, is he still in school? And how is he doing? Like, I have boys, and so everybody forgets about the boys. I think we talk about the danger for girls having these men in their spaces, but a boy going through puberty, 12, 14 years old, my sons would have been horrified having a naked girl in their locker room. So how is your son doing?
Well, they were horrified. They were definitely horrified. We were talking about, this is horrible as a parent. As a parent, you're raising your children, and I don't want to rush through anything. I want to enjoy each season, but we were talking about how there's this piece of, I can't wait for him to get out of Loudoun County Public Schools And that's horrible. I don't want to rush the time in the season, but he has learned to be bold and courageous. He stands on Joshua 1:9, and so he has learned how to defend himself and speak up in the classroom. God uses everything for good, but what I have found with he and his friends is this generation has been lied to over and over again by the people that they were expected to trust. And so because they've been lied to, I had to go back and apologize to my children, my older children, and say, I raised you to respect authority, but that's not the case now. They need to earn your respect, and they need to be truthful with you. And so I told my son he has to be respectful, but that he is to stand up for truth, and if there's an issue, then he has our backing. So they have had to learn to be bold.
Well, and it's so confusing for children. I respect adults, but not that adult quite yet. And it's hard to navigate all of this. And isn't that the intent, Martha, like to destabilize? And so,
Absolutely. And I don't have a current story to tell from my kids' perspective, but if I can just talk, I'm just going to answer a question you didn't ask, and talk about something that you might want to share with your friends and neighbors out there who may not know that there are 2 laws in existence in Virginia now, that the Youngkin administration was absolutely fantastic at neutering the last 4 years, but the laws are still in place, and without Winsome at the helm, these laws will go full bore overdrive with you-know-who. I don't want to say her name. One of them is called One Virginia. It codifies DEI into all state agencies as the operating principle. Youngkin changed equity in DEI. He changed it to opportunity. It changed the language. Again, they neutered it. He got a lot of grief from the Democrats for that, but he did it. And then the other is a teacher licensing law that requires teachers to become culturally responsive educators and re-up their license every 2 years by proving that they are proficient in this. And Virginia Education Association has also kindly captured all of the guidebook, the tutoring videos and everything put out by the Northam administration. It's all on their website still. It's ready to go if somehow we don't succeed in November. And those laws were put in place at the end of 2021, so they really didn't have time to take effect. They will take effect. Life as we know it in Virginia will get worse with DEI at the helm if we are not successful. And most parents are completely unaware of this.
So Martha, not everyone here knows, like you hear the words culturally responsive teaching, and it sounds great. Right? You want to, as a teacher, you want to serve your children and your students, and you want to care for them and approach them in a way that understands their culture. Explain briefly, if you can,
okay, so
what the problems are there.
So this is not completely accurate, but in a nutshell, it is DEI for K through 12. It is forcing teachers to adopt methods using SEL, social emotional learning, that enforce critical race theory and queer theory into their lesson plans, and make it so that, and here's a perfect example from the VDOE website, again, available on the VEA website in the Ed Equity Guide, an example of what is a good culturally responsive educator in Virginia will be a teacher who mediates power imbalances in the classroom based on sex, gender, class, race, and I think there's one more. So imagine a teacher being told that they have to mediate power imbalances in the classroom. What does that even mean? But that's what they're going to be judged on and required to prove they can do to retain their license every 2 years.
It's designed to generate racial tension in the short term.
Absolutely, and let's all be reminded, only a third of kids in the state of Virginia can read proficiently, and so teachers are asked to spend time on this and not on making sure kids can read and do math.
Now, can I just add one quick thing?
Sure.
So the Youngkin administration neutered that. I was able to pass a culturally proficient educator test online this past week with flying colors, and none of it made any sense, which was beautiful because it made no sense. So teachers don't even know what's coming down the pike, because what they've been told is proving themselves to be culturally proficient is gobbledygook for the last 4 years.
I do now understand why they call you like the woman James Lindsay.
Oh.
All right, but let's talk a little bit about some of your. You had some of the things you've uncovered in your school district and around the state. So I don't know, top 2 worst cases.
Oh, okay. Well, in March at West Springfield High School, there's a women's history class, and by the way,
In Fairfax. That's in
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yep. The teacher of this class is the sponsor for the Young Democratic Socialists of America Club. The women's history class is an elective. So anyways, in March is Women's History Month, so she wanted the students to do a display in the hallway. And it was basically the leftist rendition of the alphabet, starting with A is for abortion, coat hanger, image of a coat hanger. This was hanging in the hallway. And it went on from there. There was T is for trans women, Q is for queer, something Kamala Harris was in there, it might have been like for leadership or something. So it was a very partisan display. And I raised it with the principal initially, and I tried to give him a fair shake and say, hey, I was just made aware of this, this is nuts. And also, like, if we throw some partisan things in there, I actually said, what about Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, like holding very proud former Marine with her rifle, like, you know, like P is for patriotism. Like, I thought that that would be a legitimate response with it hanging in the hallway, right? And of course, the principal didn't respond to that in particular, but did tell, like, basically tried to ignore me. It went all the way up to the superintendent, who decided that it was a very thoughtful display. One of the kids in the school, so this was sanctioned by leadership. One of the kids in the school, a young conservative Catholic man, was really, he was very offended, particularly by the A is for abortion coat hanger, and he ripped it down. And they brought him into the office and counseled him, because that's what they do, they gaslight you, because they wanted to make him feel like he was the problem.
It's a struggle session.
Yes. So then his mom naturally reached out to me, and I was like, this is insane. Like, even adults are bothered by this. A young man to have a visceral reaction to this is a normal thing, and it's in fact so divisive, you're violating your own controversial issues policy. So like the fact that you're just kind of telling him that he's the problem is completely ridiculous and in violation of your own policy. So anyways, that's just one of the things. That was in March. More recently, I was given an email from a senior administrator of Fairfax County Public Schools. The administrator didn't give me the email, somebody else did. But anyways, he sent an email to all of the school registrars on July 1st. His name is Dave Anderson. You can look it up, this is real. I published on this. So he sent this email, which I have a copy of on IWFeatures.com, and he said, I want you to destroy all student identification documents. Like everything, their proof of identification, their parents' proof of identification, everything. So anyways, I asked a lot of questions to the leadership, to the Superintendent Reid. Why in the world would you want to destroy student identification documents? Well, on one of the flyers that they have with a QR code to help illegal immigrants evade ICE, they actually have a little line at the bottom of that flyer that says, we will not retain any student identification documents. So obviously the point is they're purging records in order to evade ICE for all students, which makes students more vulnerable. Anyways, that was recently, so there's just so many. I could go on and on and on.
So, round question, if anybody can take this. Where is there hope between these three counties? I mean, you have kids still in the schools, you have kids in still in the schools, your kids are still in the schools. So there's got to be some positive things. You have to feel like you're making headway. Why would you keep, no judgment, right? I've had my kids in all kinds of schools. There are no other options. They like the sports. You see hope. You're able to stay on top of it. I don't have the answers, but is there hope? Is there hope for changing the policies? Where would you find that?
Well, I did make some. I think one of the big things is raising parental awareness. There are a lot more people who are standing up, and also I see a lot of hope in this young generation. There are just so many kids, and the Turning Point USA, opening those in schools, like opening just a place for conservative kids, or just kids that aren't Democratic Socialists of America, to gather and share some ideas. So I see a lot of promise in the young generation. I also was able to get Superintendent Reid to make social emotional learning optional. Very few of the parents know about that, but you can actually go online and opt your kids out of it. I think it personally should be opt-in instead of opt-out, but that's one gain that we've made. And I would also like to add, some people do ask me—
Can you pause for a second? How did you make that happen? Because you have two other school districts. I don't know if you guys have an opt-in, opt-out policy for social emotional learning or any of the stuff, sex education.
Not that. We've made some other headway, and we can get to that in a second.
So how did you make that happen?
When Michelle Reid first started, I had a one-on-one meeting with her, and we discussed some of the things that we agreed on, and I met with her in good faith, and one of the things that we agreed on is all 8th graders should be proficient in Algebra 1. It should be Algebra 1 should be math for 8th graders. We also agreed that debate teams are really good for kids and they should be in all high schools. So I was trying to meet with her one-on-one to find some common ground. And then she asked me what were some of my biggest concerns, and the social emotional learning, I think, is a Trojan horse for everything, which is completely terrible in the schools if you actually look at the curriculum. And it was shortly after that it was, she had mentioned that she was going to look into making that an opt-out thing.
I love that. At Moms for Liberty, one of our 3 values is building relationships, because I believe you're not going to make any headway, no matter if you're in a liberal county or a conservative county, you're not going to make headway till you build that relationship. So great job on that.
Thank you. And can I just add one thing? I really think you can work with anybody. Nobody's going to agree on all things, but you can work with anybody. There are going to be some things that you can be in a room with anybody and find some common ground on something. But I also wanted to address a question that you raised, and I've been asked this a long time. People say you're such a critic of Fairfax County Public Schools. Why are your kids still there? And quite frankly, if they gave me the $21,000 that they're taking to educate my kids or keep them captive in their schools, and they said, here, you can choose a school, it's definitely not the school that I would choose. But that said, private school is, on average in Fairfax County, about $25,000 per year per kid. I have 3 sons in school, so that would be $75,000 per year. I'm not a trust fund person. My husband and I are like first ones in our family to go to college. So anyway, $75,000 a year when you're trying to raise a family is quite a bit. So anyways.
So thank you for what you're doing to fight back. Like again, my kids in public school, no judgment, but it's a question people ask all the time. Like they're hearing these stories and they're like, get your kid out. Well, for $75,000.
Advocate for school choice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Anyone else? Hope?
So it's absolutely hope. Hope with the current Virginia administration, we've been able to push back, and Jason Mira's his office wrote an Amicus Brief, part of a lawsuit with America First Legal, Platt versus Manfield. Our rights were violated when we were speaking up about a student with gang affiliation with MS-13 who showed up at a school after being suspended for a year, and parents didn't know. The cavalry's coming, the DOJ, that's extremely helpful. So now we feel like this administration previously, their hands were very much tied, but now they get to work in conjunction for the next few years and hopefully beyond. So that's helpful. We thought that the people who were running our schools truly had our children's best interests at heart, and unfortunately, it's captured, and that's not the case, and they are beholden to the higher up stakeholders that are running the show and putting out. But I will say that the younger generation, they kudos to the parents, because I'm telling you, these children, they're resilient, and I would say the majority of my son's young friends have all run to the conservative side because they're tired of the garbage.
It's great. Yeah, there's definitely I think a revolution happening. Great. Okay, we are about out of time for our panel, but I'll give everybody like 1 minute to like closing remarks, something you want to get across that maybe you haven't yet, and then we're going to call over our next panel. Chris, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I think there is a lot of hope. And one of the things I've learned over the past couple of years is that we have to fight at the national level, the federal level, the state level, and at our local school boards, because the local school boards' hands are tied in a lot of things because of the state. And then the state their hands are tied because of the federal laws. So with the Trump administration in and what Youngkin has been able to do, and hopefully, these guys getting in, and if we can flip the state house, I think a lot more can be undone and we can get back on track. And so I know that's something that we work very hard at Moms for Liberty.
Perfect.
Social emotional learning is a Trojan horse that needs to be eradicated from our school systems. It is dangerous. It is it's pervasive, and parents have no idea. So schools are school boards, the professional associations, they are taking advantage of the fact that parents are busy raising their children and they don't have time to know what's going on in the schools. So it's imperative that people get in there and flesh out all of this.
Thank you for that, and I'll take a moment to plug M4L Academy.org, because Missy, who's here somewhere, is doing great work as our Director of Education for M4L Academy, and each month she takes a new subject, and social emotional learning was a whole month, and so you can go there. If you don't know what it is, or why are they talking so bad about it, it has such a nice name. There's a general guide, a few pages long. You can go deeper, you can watch hour-long videos, you can dig and dig and dig, and she has a thing at the bottom now, it's like, dig in the rabbit hole. You click that, and there's like 8,000 things, and so M4LAcademy.org.
I do have hope. I often don't sound that way, but I do. And I do think there's some fatigue on the part of the general public about a lot of this stuff. What is music to my ears, though, is when I hear politicians, people on the radio, people calling in saying this is Marxism, because a few years ago, people thought that's crazy, but they know now that it's Marxism. And it's complicated, I get that, and I get that that's why a lot of politicians don't necessarily want to talk about it, because it's complicated. But it's out there that people are starting to understand that. One last bit of warning I want to give parents, though, is that, and tell your friends, be bold on social media, because again, people are starting to get it. Hazel Health is an organization that is now doing the mental health appointments from schools. They are all over the country. They have, I think, 3,000 school districts now. Prince William County Schools just announced that now free mental health appointments from school. And Hazel Health is based in San Francisco. And every negative thing that you might think is accurate. If you go on their website, you go on their Twitter feed, you look into what they're advocating for, you do not want any child with a mental health issue getting help from Hazel Health.
Actually, you don't want any child with a mental health issue getting any help at school, because they can't even educate our children, let alone take care of mental health.
And in all fairness, most of the teachers I know don't want to take on all of this mental health that they're being forced to take on, and it's a recipe for disaster. Closing remarks.
So recently I was asked, what do you think the future looks like in 5 to 10 years from now? And I thought it was an interesting question, because the answer is that depends on us. And really, I remember something Lieutenant Governor Sincere said a couple years ago when I was listening to an interview she was on, and she said, they were playing chess and we were playing checkers, but no longer. So I really hold that near and dear to my heart, because basically everything that I do is the left is trying to gaslight us that these things are not happening in our schools. And we're finding over and over and over again with proof through curriculum, through FOIAs, that they actually are. So everything I do is, one, expose the rot. They tell you that there's not any rot there, there's not any kind of, politicking, they're not trying to brainwash your kids. First thing you do is find the rot. You can do that through Freedom of Information Act, even if you don't have kids in school. And even if you don't have kids in school, you're still paying more than 50% of your property taxes to these schools, right? This is the future of America. You have the right to review curriculum, the protect PPRA, anyways. You have the right to review that curriculum and opt your kids out of things. So anyways, you find the rot, you expose the rot, you might have some platforms, maybe you have friends in office, maybe you have a social media account, maybe you can publish. You let other people know what you found, you take a stand on it, and then you mobilize others to join you. Tell your neighbors, make sure, get out and vote, make sure we're finding conservatives for the election. They're not just kind of hanging out waiting for other people to elect Winston Sears and John Reid.
Perfect. Give our panel